episode 1 was good. Like, really good. What if I were a story exec at Fox and George Lucas came to me and was like, this is the film I'm directing, and I was like, no, let's go through this right now and let's see all the points that work and don't work, and I'm going to rework it right now with you. So here, bearing in mind what George Lucas presented to all of us, we're going to get my version of episode 1. So here we go with What If. Now the big thing whenever making a sequel or prequel, whenever you're revisiting a franchise, things need to feel old and new at the same time. Now George made the misstep of thinking that familiarity meant characters. However, the same can be accomplished through theming and parallels. It also helps to have a main character. Episode 1 was very muddled in that regard. You aren't really sure who to point to, and it is really apparent who it should be. It's Obi-Wan's story, much as the way as the original trilogies were all about Luke. However, the overarching story will be about Darth Vader. With that in mind, we open in similar fashion with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn going to Naboo. However, they aren't stopping directly at the Trade Federation because right now it's peacetime. Obi-Wan is wistfully looking off into space and reminiscing about the days of yore where they were brave Jedi Knights, fighting the ultimate evil, the Sith. Whereas now they're going from routine checkups from planet to planet, kind of like galactic sheriffs. And Qui-Gon, who still is master, is like, dude, just be happy that the Sith aren't here anymore. Those were very dark times. In this moment, we get to see that Obi-Wan is naive, like Luke was at the start of his journey. But we don't have much time to think about it because what's this? The Trade Federation? They see that the ships are all going to the palace and they divert course, so they land and they find out from some native Gungans, but not Jar Jar because it's not important, that this invasion has been taking place over the past few weeks. Obi-Wan gets excited at the chance of action, while Qui-Gon is alarmed that the Galactic Senate and the Jedi Council knew nothing about this. What was once a routine checkup is now a rescue mission for the Queen. So this rescue and subsequent escape is now our first real burst of action. And since we've spent more time getting to know our characters, we're going to be more invested in this action, as opposed to meeting two strangers who then immediately take out their lightsabers. And from the escape, the same beats can play out as we land on Tatooine. So they need parts and they need to go down and get the pieces. Now this is where we start to deviate a little more, because in the released film, Obi-Wan stays on the ship while Qui-Gon and Padme go out into the desert. But Obi-Wan is our main character, so Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Padme now all go. Just like the actual film, Qui-Gon can voice some concern about taking a handmaiden out into Tatooine, and Padme can respond that she can take care of herself just fine, and maybe Qui-Gon should be more concerned about his servant taking care of himself, referring to Obi-Wan. And we get a fun back and forth bit of verbal sparring as they walk out into the desert. And that bickering would remind us of... That's one of the big things that the film was lacking, a sense of playfulness among characters, rather than just giving poop jokes to Jar Jar. And then they get to Anakin. And again, more tweaks are gonna happen. He's not a boy, he's a teen or young adult. And he's not a mechanical genius, so he definitely hasn't built C-3PO. It's great that you want to give people fan service, George, but these characters can show up later. Obi-Wan and Tatooine are familiar faces enough for episode 1. However, it is wonderful that you're showing us a different side of Tatooine. The pod racing is kind of cool, and the whole idea that there's like a scrap junkyard and that, you know, whatever, that's fun. Again, old and new. On a side note, the whole idea of Toydarians being the trump card to Jedi is kind of weird, because you did kind of create Superman in that. So to create a creature that can be like, no, 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 I don't fall for that, does work, but it also is like, why didn't the Empire just like, you know, get a bunch of Toydarians to always deal as stormtroopers, because then Jedi would never be able to... Anyway, so Qui-Gon Jinn meets Anakin and is like, the Force is strong with this one. And Obi-Wan is like, wait, what are you talking about? And Qui-Gon Jinn is like, no, no, the Force, it's really strong, because he can just feel it since midi-chlorians aren't a thing, you know? And Qui-Gon's like, oh man, I have to train him. And Obi-Wan's like, dude, I'm right here. So an upset Obi-Wan wanders the streets of Tatooine and maybe stops at a bar, you know, if George wants to reference himself. And being in a not-so-pleasant mood, he gets himself into a skirmish with a pod racer. Padme shows up and they manage to make it out alive, and we see a mutual respect developing between the two, and the hints of a blossoming romance. So they return to the pod race training, and wouldn't you know it, Wadu's pod racer manages to get himself injured, and Qui-Gon is like, oh, I can test my hunch now. Oh hey, why don't you have Anakin race? And everyone's like, and Anakin's like, I've never done that before. We're dealing with a more sheepish Anakin. He's a slave, so he wouldn't have a ton of confidence. But Qui-Gon tells Anakin as long as he uses the Force, all will be well. From there, the same bet goes down. We get to see Anakin's confidence grow when he wins. Qui-Gon's hunch is proven, and yeah, Anakin's free and gets to be a Jedi. So we got the parts and we're going back at Darth Maul. And they have that brief encounter and they're like, wait, what? Sith? So they get on the ship, they fly up, they go to Coruscant, and Queen Amidala / Padme is in the Senate and she's like, look, the Trade Federation is up in Naboo. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? Bureaucracy's amazing. She's like, I'm just gonna have to do this myself. Meanwhile, Mace Windu is chastising Qui-Gon Jinn about taking on Anakin because Anakin is too old. That, you know, completely flies. And again, when we meet the Jedi Council, we don't meet Yoda. We just hear about how awesome he is, because that's a good reveal to the character of just hearing Master Yoda, really great, Master Yoda. And we all know Master Yoda's really great because we've seen episode 5. And Mace Windu raises the point of like, what about Obi-Wan Kenobi? He hasn't fully learned. And Qui-Gon says, well, when I was teaching Obi-Wan as a Padawan, I learned a ton from him. And Obi-Wan will learn from whoever he teaches. Meanwhile, right outside the doors, Anakin and Obi-Wan are sitting waiting for Qui-Gon to get out. While they're sitting out there, Palpatine steps out. Now, Palpatine is no longer a senator, but is the intermediary between the senators and the Jedi Council. So he actually has more strings to pull because he's the one who sent them to Naboo to get Queen Amidala and everything. This also allows him to be friendly with all the Jedi. So he shows up and is like, hey, where's Master Yoda? And Obi-Wan's like, oh, you know, he's off doing amazing things because Yoda's amazing. And this is Anakin, and Anakin's like, hi! And Palpatine's like, you don't seem to like Anakin very much, and Obi-Wan confides in Palpatine. He's like, well, I'm a little jealous. And Palpatine's like, be careful, jealousy can lead you to the dark side. Hint, hint. And before we can even realize what's going on, they're on their way back to Naboo. So they all go down and they can meet the Gungans if they want, and at that point, Padme can reveal, I'm Amidala, and they're like, what? That's crazy. And that really, you know, works, because the Queen wandering around Tatooine, there would be less reason for her to be talking to Obi-Wan, so we'll hold on to that, and she'll have her big reveal, and George Lucas will be very happy because he loves his reveals. And the Gungans offer to give them their ships to travel and surprise Viceroy, blah, blah, blah. So the big thing is, we aren't having 4 different battles going on when they need to get to one point, the Viceroy, and reclaim Naboo. The Jedi, Padme, the Gungans, they're all going to take on one person. It's streamlined and simplified. And I know a lot of you are like, but wait, where's Anakin? Well, Anakin's back at the Jedi Council where he should be, because why would you take a kid when, I mean, they established that the Jedis have a training center. So just like Georgie wanted, they're all going straight to the Viceroy, and Darth Maul's back again. But instead of getting separated and going off into the Lightbridge generator room or whatever that the Jedi and Sith wind up in, they're going to stay pretty close to the action. In fact, Padme and her dealing with the droid and the Sith and the Jedi battles are going to be, you know, both kind of headed towards the same place where the Viceroy is. And right before they run off to take on Darth Maul, Padme gives a little like, take care to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan now is like, oh, you are interested in me, that's cool, and runs off with the power of love fueling him to take on Darth Maul. We get our cool lightsaber battles, we get our cool blasters, we don't need any space battle again, because who would we even care about going up and dealing with that? I mean, they somehow got onto Naboo anyway, so the blockade wasn't doing anything. So the Gungans and Amidala are like facing off on droids, and they're like, blast off, blast, blast off, blast, and they get to the Viceroy, and they're about to like be like, Viceroy, you're finished. And at that exact moment, Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan stumble into the room, and everyone's like, what? And the Viceroy's like, blam, and Padme's like, ah! And Obi-Wan's like, I'm gonna go run take care of that. Away from Qui-Gon and Darth Maul to Padme, who he cares about. Of course, in that exact moment, he's now directly responsible for when Darth Maul's like, slice, and Obi-Wan's like, wait, what? So everybody starts blasting at Maul, and Maul runs away. Obi-Wan runs over to Qui-Gon and is like, hey, Master, please just promise me you'll take care of Anakin. And Obi-Wan's like, well, shh, you'll grow and learn to be friends with one another. Oh, and if I ever see Darth Maul, yeah, I'll really kill out of him. Great. And Qui-Gon dies. Now, to me, the way that Darth Maul was handled in episode 1 is the greatest mistake of the prequel trilogies. Honestly, if there was only one thing that I could change, it would be that Darth Maul would not die. Obi-Wan needs a motivator, and Darth Maul is an embodiment of evil. For Maul to best Obi-Wan and then kill his master, there's plenty of room for growth there. And the next time they meet, it's going to be epic. In the film we got, all that Obi-Wan had to do in the subsequent 2 films was basically play Clue for the Jedi Council. It's not a personal affair. But if he's trying to find Maul, oh, you can bet he's gonna put his heart and soul into it. And even if we did allow for him to get cut in half in episode 1, in the Star Wars universe, we can have robotics replace things, and he sliced him perfectly in half, so his entire lower half is robotics. That's the perfect opportunity for Obi-Wan to be haunted by this nightmare. He'd show up again and Obi-Wan wouldn't know what to think. In this instance, Maul would be stronger, and he'd have some serious beef against Obi-Wan. And oh, look at that! There's some crazy foreshadowing of Anakin's fate, because he's like half robot, half man. Oh, funny that. And it just makes sense to have a long-term villain that's known to the protagonist. Luke sees Vader kill Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then they finally meet in Empire. The stakes are super high. And every time they meet, the relationship just gets more and more complex. Like, this one really bugs me. Let's get back to the story. So meanwhile, back in Coruscant, Darth Maul's like, yo, Sidious, really sorry I didn't, hold Naboo. And Darth Sidious is like, it's okay. Darth Maul's like, what? And Darth Sidious is like, hey, it's okay, you killed Qui-Gon Jinn, now Obi-Wan's full of rage, and, he's gonna go after you and kill you, and then he'll be my apprentice, because, I was sensing a really strong thing when I ran into him at the chamber. But what he doesn't know is that it's actually Anakin that he was sensing. So Darth Maul is like, wait, so you're going to pit everybody? And Darth Sidious is like, that's why I'm the Emperor. I pull strings all the time. And so we're like, oh, this is kinda dark. Obi-Wan's gonna turn, and before we can even really think about it, we're back to Naboo where they're all celebrating because they think everything's hunky-dory because they've freed the place. And just looking back, from the start of the film, so much has happened to Obi-Wan and he's grown so much. He's no longer the Padawan. He's been pushed from the nest and has to learn to fly. And we're excited to see where he goes, as the world is becoming more complex, as are the relationships around him. So those are my ramblings on episode 1.